Welcome to the Pharmacy Future Leaders Podcast with your host, Tony Guerra. The Pharmacy Future Leaders is part of the Pharmacy Podcast Network, focusing on pharmacy student perspectives, interviews, and the future outlook of our pharmacy industry.
This is Jaclyn Aremka, P4 pharmacy student from Drake University, and you're listening to the Pharmacy Podcast.
Welcome to the Pharmacy Podcast Network. I'm your co-host, Tony Guerra, for the Pharmacy Future Leaders Podcast, broadcasting from the Des Moines Health and Public Services building at DMAC's Ankeny campus. Connect with me via Messenger on Facebook at TonyPharmD1 or on YouTube, where we have over 1,100 videos at TonyPharmD on my YouTube channel or my website, memorizingpharmacology.com. Today we're talking with Jaclyn Aremka, a P4 student at Drake University from the Chicagoland area, who's looking forward to a career in community or ambulatory care pharmacy. She's a past Division I athlete. She's a painter and soon-to-be graduate. Welcome to the Pharmacy Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Now, it's just like with Emily, who was a previous P4 student. You were about 30 feet from me in a classroom, and I am in a conference room. One of these days, I'm going to figure out how we can have this conversation together in the same room. But tell us a little bit about your leadership road. So you started in Chicago, and 6 years later, here you are at DMAC in Des Moines doing an academic rotation. But tell us a little bit about where you started out, how you got into pharmacy, and how you got to where you are.
Yeah, so it actually really stems back to my mom. She is an oncology nurse back at Lutheran General Hospital in Chicago, and she's been there ever since she graduated. And she really has stemmed a passion in me to pursue a career in healthcare, in the healthcare field. And she really wanted me to pursue nursing specifically. And after I went in and watched her do her thing, I got power to her, but that it just wasn't in the docket for me. So I knew I still really wanted to do something in the healthcare field, but maybe something not quite hands-on as nursing is. So that kind of started my search. And then around my junior year in high school, I took a class, a chemistry class with this one specific teacher, and he kind of opened my eyes to the possibility of a career in pharmacy. And that's kind of where that all stemmed from. And then on the side, I also was an athlete in high school, and specifically I ran track, and I was looking to pursue athletics in college as well. So kind of I was looking to see a school that kind of had everything, I suppose. So that had the athletics and the academics, specifically to pharmacy. I knew that I really wanted to have kind of a 6-year program versus an 8-year program. And Drake really just kind of fit the mold for being not too far away from school as well.
Well, let's talk about those areas that I think are going to help the listeners the most, which is first, if you're a D1 athlete, that's a job in itself, although you're limited to 20 hours of practice a week. And then your pre-pharmacy still have to get into the pharmacy program. And then you're in the pharmacy program. So tell me a little bit about how that work-life balance worked, and then how sometimes you actually had to literally run from practice to the classroom.
Yep, that definitely happened. So it definitely was a bit of a balancing act, especially at the beginning, to try and figure out the best way to really balance pharmacy school and athletics. I felt like I don't want to say more involved in athletics, but I didn't get quite as involved into the pharmacy scene until I got into the professional program. So it really helped to really develop a lot of those friendships with a lot of the other athletes on the team. And I mean, Drake is a very academic-based school. So while pharmacy is a tough subject, we had a lot of other students on the team that were very academic-based. Specifically, our cross-country team, they had the highest GPA in all of the conference, the highest GPA average in all of the conference. So, I mean, I'm dealing with a lot of other athletes that are in kind of a similar position and really understand the importance of academics in along with athletics. So that was really nice to have that that balance in the beginning. And then when I got into the pharmacy program, I really didn't have as many pharmacy friendships because like you mentioned, I would have to run from practice to class. So a lot of the connections that really were formed in the pre-pharmacy program, I felt like I started to develop those a little bit later. So I ended up joining Phi Delta Chi, and now there's some of my best friends that I've ever made. But yeah, I definitely felt like I was a little bit later to the game in pharmacy in terms of making some of those friendships. So that was a little tough.
Yeah, I was also Phi Delta Chi and PDC. Well, I still am. I don't say before. It's Brothers for Life. I would get in a lot of trouble saying, I was Phi Delta Chi.
Yeah.
But in looking at that, we were all transfers as we came into the medical campus in Maryland. So we had a little bit of a different experience, but in some ways you kind of had two different lives, the life where you really had a chance to be with those that are on your track team and develop those relationships. And then you started to develop those relationships in pharmacy school. And for whatever they say about fraternities and sororities, when it comes to a pharmacy fraternity, I think it's really important that you do get involved that way. And it happens very quickly once you become a brother, once you become part of the organization. But what I wanted to focus on first was, tell me a little bit about something you did, I think, in your 5th year, where you were actually helping students during their study hours or something like that. Usually when we think, there's many times where we divide student and athlete, and we're not sure about that hyphen in between, which puts it together. But I made the mistake of thinking that my academics were going to suffer if I was an athlete, and I would have ended up being D3, not D1, if I was a D3 athlete. And I found out the opposite was true, that I really messed up. If I had been an athlete in college, I probably would have been a much better student. So tell me a little bit about how you helped other athletes after you retired as an athlete. Yeah,
so I spent my first 4 years at Drake on the track team competing. And then my 5th year, it was a little tough, not being with the team all the time. And I really wanted to find a way to still be connected to the athletic fields while also, still doing my studies. So I applied for an athletic internship and I got it. And essentially I was one of the people in charge of running the student athlete study hall. So I had about anywhere from 10 to 15 hours a week that I would have the different student athletes and just kind of walk around, make sure that, they were understanding what they were doing. It was like a free study period to make sure that they were staying on top of all of their study materials. But it was also a time where they could ask me questions, specifically if it was relating to anything medical based. So a lot of the chemistry, calculus, things like that. If they had questions like that, it was almost like a free tutor session for those athletes as well.
Tell me a little bit about the way that you teach. So here you've been able to get in front of students, and what we kind of established pretty quickly is that you have a really good eye for visuals, and not only pulling visuals and putting things into PowerPoints and things like that, but actually designing visuals and then creating a great flow from them. So can you tell me a little bit about your painting, your design thinking, just how it is that you bring kind of artistry into pharmacy? We talk about pharmacy as an art, but we're not talking that way like we've got the nice curly Q on the compound. We're talking about what is it to present material in such a way that someone not only sees it, but remembers it and it's impactful to them. So where did you get that background? How did you develop that talent?
Yeah, well, I think you hear a lot of people say that they're, visual learners, but I find that to be especially true for me. I have to kind of draw everything out and I have to see it. And it really stems back, when I think about it, it stems all the way back to when I was, 8 or 10. And I really wanted, this whiteboard for Christmas. Was the only real present that I wanted. And so, I got this huge 10-foot by 5-foot whiteboard, and I would use it all the way through high school and even now today through college as well, to study for different exams and whatnot. And I just found that it was very helpful for me to draw it out and to see it, and not only just make lists or charts, but to actually, when we're talking about specific mechanisms of drugs, to actually draw it out and be like, oh, this drug works here. And I think if you can put those pieces together, you're not just talking about a specific drug, but you can actually visualize it working in the body, things like that. So I tried to bring a lot of those similar concepts when I was teaching. I put a lot of visuals up. I also incorporated some videos to get kind of the moving pictures involved as well, to kind of really help a lot of the students kind of see a lot of these topics come together and see how they're actually working.
And tell me a little bit about was it the office that we brought in or something like that, sometimes you have to bring in something that is related, but in some way changes the mood because you have this kind of fatigue factor that goes on in a longer class. How do you get students back engaged? What are the recommendations you might have? So somebody's studying, 5-6 hours for the, NAPLEX or something like that. They've got their RX Prep BRIC or Elsevier or Kaplan. What do you recommend, time-wise, 60 minutes, 90 minutes? What kind of a break do you think you should get?
Yeah, well, specifically what you're talking about, I taught the 3-hour evening classes for you, and I taught specifically cardiology and endocrinology. And for cardiology, I brought up the CPR clip from the office, and then from endocrinology, I brought up kind of a diabetes intervention clip. So kind of just bringing some humor into the mix a little bit to kind of help students re-engage. I know it can be kind of difficult having those really long classes to keep students engaged for that whole time. So still trying to find information that's relevant, but in kind of a fun way, and tying it back into the importance of why these topics are important, essentially. And I find that when I'm studying too, I obviously take breaks, but I like to just maybe not incorporate humor all the time into it, but I always try and switch up maybe the different ways in which I'm studying. So if I'm studying for, therapeutics, for instance, instead of studying all one topic, I might switch it up and all of a sudden switch to another topic. And it kind of ties into another concept that I learned here from you, that interleaving. So kind of helping to maybe not always focus on one topic at a time, but it helps to retain information by kind of switching and jumping from topic to topic. You might not get the results immediately, but you definitely will see the results in the long run of memory and retention.
So it sounds like your road was absolutely perfect. You figured out what you wanted to do in chemistry class. You graduated from pharmacy in 6 years, which without doing the 5-year, which is pretty accelerated. But I think 6 years is manageable, but you got the 2 done, and then you did the 4, and then you were also a D1 athlete at the same time. Did anything go wrong on your pharmacy journey? Was there anything tough that happened? Because it sounds like it was all planned from birth.
No, definitely. There were a lot of bumps along the way. I would say really the hardest part for me was making that transition. I mentioned it a little earlier, but making that transition from the athletic world into the pharmacy world. I think Drake has this really great program where you can get involved in a lot of these different professional pharmacy activities or clubs, things like that, from pretty early on. You can do that in your undergrad, in your pre-pharmacy experience. And I found that to be the case with a lot of the Phi Delta Chi members. So I felt a little, I guess, as a transfer student almost coming into the professional program where everyone kind of already had their pharmacy cliques and whatnot. So it was a little tough to kind of put myself out there when I'd already really been at the school for 2 years and kind of reestablish a lot of those pharmacy connections. So I guess that would be one of the things that I would have changed looking back on my pharmacy experiences. I really wish that I got involved in Phi Delta Chi earlier because they really are great people. And I love all of my FIDEX brothers and just really wish that I got involved a little bit earlier.
Well, let's take a look a little bit forward. You're going to be able to go back to the Chicagoland area after a couple weeks here. You're done with your APPE here. Tell me a little bit about what you're looking forward to in the immediate future about getting home and your next couple of rotations, and then maybe in the future what you're thinking about possibly after graduation.
Yeah, so I think one of the hardest parts about being here in Iowa is being away from my family. I don't have any family here in Iowa. Any blood family, that is. So all of my family are back in the Chicagoland area, and being in pharmacy can be while fun. It's also you put in a lot of work for it. So I spent a lot of summers here working in the pharmacy, things like that. So I spent a lot of time away from my family, and I think one of the great things about this P4 year is being able to travel a little bit more and having that flexibility. And I'm just really excited to be able to practice pharmacy in Illinois too, where I can go and come home to my family. So my first rotation, I was fortunate to have that experience, and then the next 2 rotations after this one, I'll be living at home too. So that will be nice. But yeah, I'm heading to the Cancer Treatment Center of America after this rotation in Zion, Illinois, and then I will be stationed on Lakeshore Drive in downtown Chicago at the Diamond Headache Clinic. So those are kind of my next 10 weeks in a nutshell. And then from there, I'm kind of just back and forth between here in Des Moines and back at home. And really, I'm just excited to really see that future kind of start coming together and start practicing pharmacy in Illinois a little bit more. So really excited, whether that's in a retail setting or an ambulatory care setting. I'm pretty open still. I talked to you a little bit too about incorporating, your side hustles that you talked about. So I do want to incorporate maybe some sort of academic based side hustle, whether that be, reaching out to other high schools in the area and maybe trying to implement like a healthcare club or working on some sort of pharmacology coloring book. I'm not really sure. I'm pretty open to different possibilities, but I'm really excited for the future and kind of all of the different possibilities that it offers.
Yeah, when Aaron Albert said that word, I kind of was like, hustle. I'm kind of a pretty straight-laced guy, and then I took the 2 definitions of hustle. So there's hustle as in you're taking someone's money from them, but then there's also hustle as in hurry up or do extra work. And I always thought of side hustle as this is the extra work. So this is actually the least amount of work you've had to do in your 6 years because you had job and athlete and you couldn't have a job while you were an athlete, but you were an athlete, and then you were at school, and then you've always done at least 2 things, usually 3 things with Phi Delta Chi. And now, how is it to be able to just kind of focus on school and, well, I know your relations in town, and then you've got your family back home, but is it kind of a nice transition that you're having as you're kind of going out from there? Because I feel like you've not let up, even though you've only got maybe 1 or 2 things now instead of maybe 3 or 4.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm able to. This rotation's really nice because I feel like I get to focus on a lot of the areas of pharmacy that I really want to focus on. So I'm using a lot of this time to, brush up on some of the more difficult topics such as oncology and HIV specifically in the next coming weeks. But yeah, it just it's nice being able to have this time where you don't have to necessarily study for anything in particular, but it's on your own time, and it's what you want to look into a little bit more, and that's just something that I've never really had that luxury of. So it's pretty nice to be able to. It's just pretty nice. It's nice to be able to figure out where I want to spend that time and what I want to look into and dig into a little bit deeper.
How did so? I guess Des Moines, just a city of maybe 100, 200,000 people, but you're talking about rotations that are in downtown Chicago. How, as a Drake student, do you get those? Or does Drake have established relationships? Because I know Drake's residency placement rate is absolutely ridiculous based on its size. Like, it's this tiny school with this giant acceptance rate. Tell me a little bit about how that works, where you're able to go right back to Chicago, right exactly where you wanted to go, but you're not in Chicago school, and there's, I think, 6 or 7 out there.
Yeah, so that's one of the great things about Drake, too. At my time here, or not here specifically, but at my time being a P4 student, I've been able to connect with some other students from some other schools, and it sounds like they stay more local based. And so that's one of the really cool things about Drake is they have these connections really all over the place. I know I have a friend who's out in Alaska right now. I have another friend who's out in
that's
Australia.
Good.
Australia. So I have a friend that's out in Alaska. I have another friend that's out in Australia right now. I know a couple people that are going all the way out to Portland, Oregon. So kind of just, there's connections really all over the place that you can go. So one of the nice things is with Drake being in the Midwest that there's quite a few options really in the Midwest area to go. Granted, a lot of them do still reside in Iowa, but there are quite a few in Minnesota, in Illinois, in Wisconsin, St. Louis area. So while Drake is in the Des Moines area, they're very, I guess, familiar with the fact that a lot of students might not be from the Iowa area and do make those relationships with other states and other countries too to help get.
I've heard the same thing from students that there's no problem with Mayo or getting back to Wisconsin or getting even to Arizona. Gosh, I've heard Seattle, other places. So while the one thing about the privates is that the tuition doesn't change if you're in-state, out-of-state. So their mindset has always kind of been national in terms of a pharmacy school, which is, I think, one of the things my wife liked about it is that she could really go anywhere she wanted. And I was really fortunate that in her P4 year, she got to spend some time with me in Baltimore. But I married an Iowan, which is marrying a Midwesterner, which means you marry the Midwest and you live here. And I love Iowa, but I never would have discovered it if it wasn't for her. So I think that Drake really is kind of one of those really, it's a small school with a D1 level athletic program across the board, rather than just having that one program like basketball or something like that be D1. And then it's got this kind of global presence. So tell me a little bit about what you think would be some maybe just blanket advice for some student coming out of high school, because most of the students coming to Drake are going to be coming straight from high school. What is it that you would tell them if you were maybe giving a tour of the campus, if they were coming in for a visit or something like that?
Yeah, I would tell them, find something that you're passionate about and get involved early on, whether that's, athletics, whether that's playing an instrument, whether that's some sort of club or intramurals or whatever that may be. I think it's just really important to make sure that you're building those connections with not only pharmacy students and pre-pharmacy students, but also with other individuals too, because you never know. I mean, pharmacy is a small world, but you never know down the road other connections that might arise too.
How would you prefer people contact you? I'm sure some people would want to talk to you a little bit more about pharmacy, understand your road, and what they could get from just talking to you.
Yeah, so the best way to contact me right now is probably going to be by email. So that's going to be my first name, Jaclyn dot my last name, Aremka at drake.edu.
Okay, and then a couple of quick hit questions here at the end. What's your best daily ritual to keep your work on track?
Yeah, best daily ritual. I really like to, I wake up in the morning. I always have to have my cup of coffee, I guess is my morning ritual to kind of get that little jolt of energy. But then really at the end of the day, I like to wind down a little bit. Right now I'm on a parenthood kick, so maybe do something that's maybe not pharmacy related a little bit to kind of just clear the mind, get a little relaxed, and then hit the bed.
And then, what's the best career advice you've ever received or given? This high school chemistry teacher fascinates me, but it doesn't have to be that person. It could be someone else that maybe just gave you some great advice.
This is a tough question. I think the best advice that I've really gotten from my family is, it's only school. I know that maybe sounds like a bad thing, but at the end of the day, I think I would sometimes get so wrapped up in the grade and kind of lose focus of everything as a whole. So just kind of know that, it's only school, but to kind of make sure that you're still having experiences outside of just the classroom too, making sure that, you have a social life too, because at the end of the day, you're not going to have just your nose trapped behind a book. It's important to have those connections with other individuals too.
Yeah, you seem very balanced, where many students really struggle with the urgent versus the important, and they make so many things urgent that they never get to the important. But I feel like I don't want to say come of age, but you just do such a great job every time, we talk in the morning for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, sometimes an hour, and you have this great picture of what you're going to do today, what you're going to do over the next couple of weeks, and you just develop this really, you just seem like someone that I would come to when I just needed to be to get a feeling of calmness, and it just, you just seem very put together. When I come from after dropping my kids off, I'm just like, all right, well, I'm going to go see Jaclyn for a little bit. So it's going to be calm. It's going to be organized. Everything's going to be in order again. So, but what inspires you?
What inspires me? I think really my family. My family really inspires me. While pharmacy is a great career and a great option, at the end of the day, I really want to be that family person, that mom, that I want to have that family unit that I can come home to and to talk to. So I think just my family in general, seeing how close knit we all are, and even though I've been away at school for so long, when I come back home, we get together with all my cousins and aunts and uncles and to see my brother. So really, just my family in general really inspires me to keep going and know that they're always there for me and rooting for me.
Okay, well, just to give you this one caveat, apparently a guy doesn't really know he's a dad, or it doesn't really hit him until he hears the heartbeat on the ultrasound. So just give whoever it is a break when that time comes, because I got the business for not being as involved or whatever I was supposed to be before. And it wasn't that I didn't care, I just didn't have an opinion, but it came out as I don't care. But then when those heartbeats came, it was just, and we had 3 heartbeats at once. That's really when it hits. And I just wanted to segue into, thank you for being here. I know the students have really benefited from you, and we didn't talk about it through the actual interview, but in looking back at last semester versus this semester, one of the exams the students actually did 5% better naturally without any curve or anything. So thank you for all of the energy that you've put into the students here.
Yeah, thanks for giving me the opportunity to.
Well, thanks for being on the Pharmacy Podcast. If you'd be interested in being on the Pharmacy Podcast, the easiest way to get in touch with me is by email at aaguerra@dmac.edu. And we thank you so much for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Pharmacy Future Leaders Podcast with your host, Tony Guerra. Be sure to share the show with the hashtag Pharmacy Future Leaders.